Hey guys, in this video we'll be designing a chair that's cut out of 19mm thick plywood, and we're creating a design that will be stacked out of slices but with gaps in between, so we'll need to design some spaces for that as well. So we're going to start in our front viewport by designing the rough outline of our chair as a guideline and then design something aesthetically pleasing that fits within that. So I'm going to go ahead and say my seating area should be 350mm long or deep, 350 that way. And that's the area we're going to be sitting on. And my chair should be at least 500mm high. So I'm going to say move that guy up 500mm to there. And I know the back of my chair should be 450mm tall. So I'm going to go ahead and say 450 up that way. But I want to lean it back just a little bit. So I'm going to hold down my shift key to disable ortho and do that. So that should be the rough outline of my chair. Now that means my legs also need to be wider than this. So that way, and the same here. So that gives me a starting point. Now I'm going to make the feet about 18mm long. So I'm going to draw a line here, 18mm that way, and just slide it out that way to kind of get something aesthetic. I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to mirror this to the opposite side from the middle of my seating point. So these will be the feet of my chair, and this needs to be the back of my chair. Now I can design something aesthetic that fits within the boundaries of this area. So I'm going to go ahead and use my curve and interpolate points tool to start off just designing this and dipping down with maybe 50 or so millimeters running through that section there, going up this way, offering a little bit of lumbar support and ending there. That gives me this shape. Now, I'm not entirely happy with it. I'm going to tweak it just a little bit by grabbing the points and editing that. And that's mostly, I think I'm happy with that shape, yeah. I'm just going to make that back a little bit less protrudy, if that's a word. And up there just a little bit. All right, so that gives me that. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and draw the leg section. I'm going to use the same curve and interpolate points tool, start somewhere here and bulge out a little bit. I don't want to waste too much material, so I'm going to go inwards there and then end here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and tweak that shape a little bit just to get something slightly more aesthetic. Doesn't have to bulge out that much over here, not so much over there. I'm going to grab this guy and bring it in over there so I can blend those two curves together. Grabbing those points. I'm just kind of positioning these until I get something I think is vaguely aesthetically pleasing. That gives me that. I'm going to go ahead and join these two, the seating area and the leg, by saying blend arc between you two. Ooh, that's going to be horrible. I'm going to go ahead and just grab that guy and move it out to here. Move that guy out to there. Let's see what happens if I delete that point. I think that's going to give us a better blend. Let's try blend arc again and see what our blend looks like. That's a little bit better, but I just want to tweak it a little bit more. I'm just shuffling these points around until I get a relatively smooth bend out of that guy over there. I'm happy with that. Next up, I'm going to do the back section. I'm going to go ahead and select the curve and interpolate points tool again, and I'm going to go in a little bit and then offer enough material back here to offer a little bit of strength. But I don't want to go too thin on this back section here because I need to be able to join over there as well. And this bulge might be a little bit excessive. I'm going to go up here and in a little bit there so I don't waste too much material. And I could, in theory, make this guy a little bit smaller there too. I think that should do the trick. All right, so I'm going to make that guy a little bit skinnier there, a little bit skinnier there. And I'm going to aim for a distance of about maybe 80-ish here. I'm going to do a line dimension just to see what that distance is. 60, that's a bit on the tight side. I'm going to grab these points and move it out just a little bit. And that should do exactly what I need it to. All right, so next up, I need to do this inside section there. Oh, I'm not entirely happy with that. I want a nice rounded curve there as well. That should do the trick. And lastly, this bottom section here. I cut in a little bit too much there. So I'm going to go ahead and say curve and interpolate points again and go from here. I can actually just do that with an arc. That should do for now. I'm going to go and do that with just an arc for that section. And again, I'm getting a little bit on the skinny side there for the strength in my leg. And I could maybe do a cutout here if I wanted to. Let's see what that looks like. I select everything here and say, well, let's blend that guy upstairs first. Go ahead and say blend arc here and here. That should do the trick. I'm going to go ahead and join everything. Join. I don't need these guidelines anymore. So with that done, this bulge here is bugging me a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do that to smooth that bulge out a little bit. And next up, I'm going to offset this curve with, let's say, 80 and see what that does. Yes, that gives me this bit of a horrible mess over here. I'm going to grab that guy and say rebuild. Rebuild, I had 47 points. I'm going to knock that down to something more manageable. Let's do 12 and say, okay, that gives us a much smoother shape. But I can now go ahead and tweak that shape so that it conforms a little bit better to the rest of my chair. And it was just a quick shortcut to get that visually similar shape on the inside. That should do the trick. I just want to leave myself a little bit of space. I need to join here and here over there at the chair section, maybe one joint over here, and then a last joint upstairs. So I think that should do the trick, and it looks pretty decent. All right, so next up, I'm going to go ahead and quickly measure my chair while I'm sitting here. I forgot to make this measurement, and I want my chair to be 50 millimeters wide as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I want to grab this, and I'm going to use my top viewport and say I want to make a copy all the way over there, 500 millimeters over that way. That gives me my two curves. That'll be the widest point between those two. So that's going to be the base for my chair. Next up, what I want to do is I also need to, that should do the trick. That should be perfectly fine. Now what I want to do is I want to connect some of these points between them. I'm going to go from this one to that one, from that end to this end, from that end to this end. And this is just going to help me create a surface between those two objects. From this quad to that quad over there, from this end to that end over there. And I just need to make sure that I'm selecting the same point on both sides. This end to that end to this end, that quadrant to that quadrant. And I think that should do the trick. Maybe to do one more out here. That mid to that mid. I also want to make sure that I want to link from this quadrant to that one. And I think that's going to do it for us. But the difference being is we need to tweak this one, and maybe that one just a little bit. We want to create a concave section there so our chair is slightly more comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to do an arc. And I need my front viewport, or my right viewport, to make this one work as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create an arc from that end to this end. And I'm just going to bend this arc in ever so slightly. Again, I'm going to do one on this area here, bend the arc in a little bit more. So that's a deeper seating area. One over here, from this end to that end. This time I'm doing it in the top viewport, bending in just a little bit. That might be a little bit too much. I'm going to edit that point quickly and say move inwards just a little bit. Don't want it to get too deep over there. And lastly, this guy at the top, let's do another arc between that point and this point. And to make sure that everything works properly, I'm going to go ahead and say copy that guy from here to there. Now I might need to do a straight section over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a straight line from that end to that end. And I might now need to rotate some of these in my front viewport because I want to make sure that these arcs remain somewhat perpendicular to the rail beacon, the sweeping, which is that one. So I'm going to select this guy and say rotate around that end and just rotate it so that it's approximately perpendicular to that line. Same thing here. And I'm holding down my shift key to briefly or temporarily disable my ortho. Otherwise, it would snap to my preset ortho dimension. Just going to go ahead and do that. So that's the indent or lower section for my seating, and everything else can be straight. All right, so there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and say I have these two objects. I want to sweep those two. I'm going to go ahead and loft this guy later. So let's do sweep two rails, rail 1, rail 2, cross section, cross section, cross section, cross section, cross section, cross section, cross section. Remember the straight line up there and this guy, and then come back down for these straight guys as well. And now all I have to do is I have to make sure that I'm going to get this pop-up window, make sure I say I want to close sweep, and I say okay. And you'll see it creates this indentation for us over there. Next up, what I want to make sure is that I have enough body to be able to add my joints in there. I'm just going to create or draw a quick circle here that is 25 millimeters, diameter of 25 millimeters. And it's a bit of a tight squeeze in there, but it should do the trick. It should work just fine. All right, cool. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and grab that guy, and I want to say extrude straight through that way. I'm going to say extrude to there. And I need to cap these as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to surface from planar curves, select this curve, that curve, hit enter, join this, this, and this on the opposite side. So join, that'll now be a details valid. Oh, it's open. Let's just have a look at it and see where it's open. If you ever run into something like that, I'm going to go ahead and say, select the object and say show edges. Oh, and it's open there. That's very interesting. So our rail sweep there seems to have been a little bit peculiar. Not a crisis. We're not going to need that at the end of the day. We're going to go ahead and say, I want to, that extrusion, I'm going to say explode and delete this guy. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that guy. I'm going to select the poly surface or this outside poly surface. I'm going to say split or trim really. Select that as my cutting surface. And I want to say trim there and trim there. So that creates that hole. Now go ahead and join everything. And now I don't really need any of my curves anymore, except maybe these last two. So I'm going to go ahead and say select everything except this guy and these two curves at this end. And I'm going to say hide. So I don't have excess curves to worry about. Now I'm going to use this to create profiles or cut lines from this object. So I'm going to close my edges dialog, and in my top viewport, I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create contour lines out of that object. It says contour base point, our widest point here, direction perpendicular to contour planes, that point over there. And now I can tell it the distance between contours. Now my wood is 19 millimeters thick, and I want to have a gap equal to each piece of wood. So I need contour lines every 38 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 38 and hit enter. And that gives me that. Lovely. Now I did make a slight thinking error here, or error calculation. I need a measurement that's exactly the width of my wood, very close to this dimension. So I'm going to have to go ahead and do a little bit of math, or I can just count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 points that way. So if I do exactly the same operation again, 6 millimeters in, I shouldn't have an issue. I'm going to go ahead and say contour this guy. Did I make contours? Yes, I did. I'm just going to undo that step. I'm going to redo my contour lines of this object. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need my spacing to be equal and even. So I needed to do that. So I do this, 38 again. And now I should have my equal spacing, or that actually made the exactly opposite of what I should do. It should be 3 millimeters in. I'm going to do that again. Contour lines on this object. 1, 2, 3 millimeters in, going this way. And now with 38 millimeter spacing, I should have 3 millimeters there, and 3 millimeters there, which means my spacing is exactly even and correct. All right, that'll do the trick. Next up, I'm going to grab those same contour lines that I've just created, and I'm going to extrude those. I'm selecting everything here, and I'm saying hide. I don't want those. This extra state, I don't need those. Back again. Hide that guy. So that gives me my contour lines I need to do an extrusion of to create my object and my shape. I'm going to go ahead and say select all of those. That's why I hid the extra ones. So I can just do one quick broad sweep select. And I'm going to go ahead and say extrude all of those in my front viewport with a distance of 19 millimeters. And that gives me my exactly symmetrical slices to create my chair with. There we go. And next step I need to do is I need to create the joints or the holes so I can join this entire thing together. And obviously add some spaces. So what I want to do is I want to create a cutout through these. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create a cylinder that is 25 millimeters in diameter. And the reason why I do that is because I'm going to add wooden dowels or a broomstick that is 25 millimeters diameter as the piece of wood that links these slices together. So there's one. I can now go ahead and say I want to make a copy of that. And I'm going to add one approximately there. I'm going to add one at the opposite foot over there. I'm going to need to add one somewhere here. Let's copy that one again. Copy to somewhere over there. I'm going to refine that one as well because I want to be very precise with where I place it there, about halfway through. And then the last step is just to add a last one at the top there. So I'm just going to say copy and add one more up there. All right, so that'll allow me to slide these wooden dowels in afterwards and glue everything together. But as you can see here, I still have these open gaps. So in theory, all I need to do is cut a bunch of donuts that'll fit in there. Now with these guys, I can easily fit let's try an 80. Easily fit in an 80 millimeter one, but I'm going to be wasting wood for no apparent reason there. So I think a 50 should do the trick. So if I do a 50 millimeter sized donut, it'll easily fit in there and not waste too much wood. And for this guy up here, I might need to be able to go a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to eyeball that with a little bit of a gap there and measure that dimension. So from here to here, that gives me a circle with 45. So I think if I cut 45s everywhere, I should be happy. So that means I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And go ahead and delete that. That means if I draw a circle with a diameter of 45, with an inside hole of 25, and I cut a number of these, they will slide in between these gaps and fit in there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that guy and say I want to extrude. And that should be 19 millimeters thick as well. And that can now be my spacer to go in between these sections over there. So I'm just temporarily sliding it over there. And I can now Boolean difference these rods out of that section. So I'm going to go ahead and say Boolean difference, keep those sections cut with this, this, and this. Yes, please. So that does all of those cuts for me. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I want you. I want to move. Well, let's try copy. Copy from that center to that center. So that places that donut exactly in between those. And let's do a few more. I'm going to select the one in there and say copy from that center to that center to that center, to that center, and to that center. All right, so that takes care of the donuts that go through the first phase of this guy. And now we can do the same thing. We can either do a grid array or simply copy and paste all of those through. So I'm going to go ahead and say, select all of these, not the curves, obviously. And I want to make a grid array. Or rectangular array, I apologize, rectangular array in the Y direction. So X direction, 1. Y direction, I want to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Let's do 13 in the Y direction and then 1 in the Z direction. And now I need to have my spacing, and that should be 38 as well. That gives me exactly the spacing I needed to create the little donuts between each one of those. And then lastly, just to stand in for the wooden dowel, I'm going to go ahead and say I want to extrude this one, that one, that one, just those edges. I go back to my top viewport and simply say extrude all the way through to there. And that gives me the wooden dowels that would be keeping everything in place. And there we go. That's our chair from Slices. Hope that was useful. Thank you.